The Ashford family had decided long ago that Victoria was a disappointment, not in any dramatic way. She hadn't committed a scandalous sin or brought obvious dishonor upon them. She had simply failed to be the daughter they wanted. She was too plain for a good marriage, too quiet for social prominence, too independent-minded for a woman of her station. At 26 years old, Victoria had become what families with daughters feared most, a spinster, not due to lack of opportunity, but due to her own refusal to accept the men her family deemed suitable. She had rejected 3 proposals from men she didn't love, and in doing so had committed an unforgivable sin. She had prioritized her own happiness over her family's social advancement. Her parents had finally reached their limit with her. The letter was delivered without ceremony, as if it was simply another household matter requiring attention. Victoria, your continued refusal to marry has become an embarrassment to this family. Your presence in our home serves no purpose and brings us only shame. You will be relocated to the home of your aunt in Sacramento, where you will live out your days in quiet obscurity. You are no longer welcome here. Consider yourself cast out. Victoria was given 2 days to pack her belongings and depart. No goodbye dinner. No family gathering. Simply a carriage arranged to take her to the train station and a small allowance that would provide for her basic needs. Nothing more. She was, in every meaningful way, erased from her family, cast out not for wickedness, but for the crime of being herself. The train to Sacramento was crowded with people heading west for various reasons. Some seeking fortune, others seeking escape, most seeking something better than what they had left behind. Victoria sat alone in her seat, watching the landscape change from familiar Boston suburbs to wild frontier, and understood that she was truly starting over with nothing but the clothes she had packed and the knowledge that her own family had deemed her disposable. The aunt in Sacramento was pleasant enough, but distant. She provided Victoria with a room, food, and the opportunity to work as a companion. Tasks that were meaningful only in their role of keeping Victoria occupied and out of the way. Victoria understood that this was charity, not welcome. She was a burden her aunt had agreed to shoulder out of family obligation. Nothing more. 2 years passed this way. Victoria worked without complaint, lived quietly, and tried not to take up too much space in a household that had clearly not wanted her. She spent her free time reading and writing letters to friends back east, letters that were rarely answered. She had resigned herself to a life of quiet, unmarked existence. She had accepted that she would spend her days managing other people's homes, her nights alone in her room, and her future entirely unremarkable. She had made peace with being forgotten. Then a wealthy rancher named Edward Thornton came to Sacramento on business. Edward was a man of considerable means, owner of vast land holdings in Nevada, successful in cattle operations, respected throughout the territory for his integrity and his shrewd business sense. He was in his mid-40s, had never married, and had long ago stopped believing that romantic love was something that happened to men like him. He came to Sacramento to finalize a land purchase, and he stayed at the finest hotel in the city. It was at a dinner hosted by the hotel manager that he first encountered Victoria. She was not the most beautiful woman in the room. She was not the most accomplished. She was not the most sought after. But as Edward observed her throughout the evening, the way she listened more than she spoke, the way her eyes held genuine intelligence, the way she moved through the room with quiet grace, he found himself captivated. He made a point of speaking with her, expecting the usual social pleasantries and nothing more. Instead, he found himself in conversation with a woman who had genuine thoughts about literature, philosophy, and the changing landscape of the American frontier. She didn't perform for him. She didn't flirt or posture. She simply spoke with genuine authenticity. When the evening ended and Edward learned that Victoria was employed as companion to her aunt, something shifted in his understanding. This was not a woman of social prominence. This was not a woman being paraded through society for strategic marriage advantage. This was a woman who had been somehow cast aside by circumstance and was managing her life with quiet dignity. He found himself thinking about her long into the night, and by morning he had made a decision that surprised even himself. He would ask this woman to marry him, but not before he understood why she was here, alone, seemingly forgotten by the world. Edward arranged to encounter Victoria at the market the next day. He approached her with careful courtesy, and they walked together while he asked questions, gentle questions that gradually revealed her story. The rejections, the family's disappointment, the casting out, the quiet resignation to a life of solitude and service. As Edward listened, he felt something profound settle in his chest. This woman, intelligent, kind, genuine, had been deemed disposable by people who should have treasured her, and she had somehow survived that judgment without becoming bitter or broken. "Victoria," Edward said finally, his voice steady and certain, "I have a proposal for you, and I want you to hear me out completely before you respond." Victoria's expression became wary. She had learned to be suspicious of men's proposals. "I am a wealthy man," Edward continued. "I have land, cattle, resources, and a life that is comfortable but empty in one crucial way. I have no partner, no one to share it with, no one who understands me beyond business and surface pleasantries. I came to Sacramento to conduct business, and instead, I found a woman of remarkable character being treated as if she is disposable. I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife, not because you're the best available option, but because in the brief time I've known you, I've come to believe you are irreplaceable." Victoria stared at him. "You're asking me to marry you? You barely know me." "I know enough," Edward replied. "I know that your family's judgment about your worth is profoundly wrong. I know that you have intelligence, kindness, and genuine character. I know that being cast out by people who should have valued you hasn't destroyed your ability to be good. That's all I need to know." "This could be a trick," Victoria said, protecting herself. "You could be trying to—" "I could be many things," Edward agreed. "But I'm not. I'm offering you partnership, respect, and the opportunity to build a life with someone who sees your true value. If you say no, I'll accept it, and you'll never hear from me again. But I want you to know that I see you, Victoria, and I think you're magnificent." Victoria said yes, though it took her weeks to believe it was real. The marriage took place in Sacramento, a quiet affair with only her aunt in attendance. And as Victoria spoke her vows, she understood something that shattered her years of quiet resignation. She was not disposable. She was not a disappointment. She was a woman of genuine worth, and there was a man willing to stake his life on proving it. Edward brought Victoria to his ranch in Nevada, a sprawling operation that was even more impressive than she had imagined. He introduced her not as a wife he had acquired, but as a partner whose intelligence and perspective he valued. He involved her in decisions about the ranch. He asked her opinions about business matters. He treated her as an equal in every meaningful way. Most importantly, he made it clear to everyone who encountered them that Victoria was not simply his wife. She was his greatest blessing. He said it often, without irony or performance. He said it because he meant it with absolute conviction. Victoria flourished in this environment. She managed a household with brilliant efficiency. She worked alongside Edward on ranch operations, learning the business thoroughly. She became involved in the community, eventually establishing a school for children on the ranch and in the surrounding area. Years later, when people asked Victoria about the moment Edward had called her his greatest blessing, about the moment she had understood that being cast out by her family was not the end of her story, but simply the beginning of a better one, she spoke with the kind of clarity that comes from genuine transformation. "I was cast out," Victoria would say, "because I refused to be what my family wanted me to be. They believed my value came from who I married, from how I reflected their status, from my usefulness to their social advancement. When I couldn't deliver those things, they decided I was worthless. But Edward looked at me and saw something completely different. He saw a person of genuine value, not conditional value based on my utility, but inherent value based on who I was." She would pause, and her eyes would hold the depth of understanding that comes from being truly seen. "The most beautiful part," she would continue, "is that he didn't rescue me or fix me or change me. He simply claimed me. He said, 'You're mine. You're my greatest blessing.' And through his consistent actions, his respect, his partnership, his unwavering belief in my worth, he taught me to believe it too. My family's casting out of me was their loss. Though they never understood that, Edward understood it immediately, and he spent the rest of his life showing me every single day that I was exactly what he wanted. When Edward died at 83, Victoria was at his side. They had been together for 37 years. 37 years of partnership, respect, and a daily affirmation that she was treasured. At his funeral, Victoria spoke about the man who had seen her value when her own family had not, who had claimed her as his greatest blessing, and who had spent decades proving through his actions that her family's judgment was not the truth of who she was. "He rescued me," Victoria told the gathered community, "not from poverty or danger, but from obscurity and self-doubt. He took a woman my own family had deemed worthless and proved that their judgment was utterly wrong. Through his love, he didn't just save my life, he gave my life meaning. He made me understand that being cast out by one family doesn't mean you're disposable. It simply means you were waiting for the person who would recognize your true worth." Victoria lived for another 9 years after Edward's death. She spent those years continuing the work they had begun together. The school, the ranch operations, the community involvement that had defined their partnership. She became a mentor to young women who had been rejected or abandoned, teaching them that casting out by one group doesn't determine your value in the eyes of someone who truly sees you. On her grave, simple words were inscribed: Victoria Thornton. She was cast out by her family. A rancher made her his greatest blessing. Through her life, she showed countless others her true worth. And in Nevada, the Thornton Foundation, established to support education and opportunity for rejected and overlooked women, continued the legacy of two people who understood that sometimes the greatest blessing in life is being truly seen by someone who refuses to accept society's judgment about your worth.